If you are over 50 and you wake up every morning already tired, not sleepy, but depleted as if the night gave you nothing back, I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes. Because what I'm about to share with you changed my life at 45 years old, and it may explain something your doctor has never been able to explain to you. There was a woman I knew from our community in Brooklyn. I will call her Ruth. She was vibrant, sharp, generous. She cooked for everyone. She showed up to every gathering, every Shiva, every celebration. She was the kind of woman who made a room warmer just by walking into it. And she died at 67. Heart failure, metabolic collapse. Her numbers had been slipping for years. Her doctor called it manageable. Her family called it a shock. I was 32 years old when Ruth died. I remember sitting in my grandmother Rachel's kitchen after the Shiva. And she said something I did not fully understand until I was a doctor myself. She said, "Sarah, I watched Ruth eat after dark every single night for 30 years. I told her. She wouldn't listen. The body needs its night just like Shabbat needs its night. When you take that away from the body, you take away its only chance to heal." I am Dr. Sarah Levine. I trained at Hadassah Medical School at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I have spent over 40 years in preventive medicine, and for most of those years, I have been studying the gap between what my grandmother Rachel knew and what the medical textbooks taught. Today, I want to tell you about one of the most common and most damaging nightly habits that millions of women over 50 practice without realizing what it is costing them. It is a habit that feels harmless, it feels comforting. And it was something my grandmother warned me about decades before the Salk Institute existed, decades before circadian biology became a field of scientific research, decades before any physician used the phrase metabolic window. This teaching is part of what I call the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, a system I have spent 40 years documenting, drawing from my grandmother Rachel's handwritten notebooks, from Maimonides, from the Talmud, from the Torah, and from the most rigorous research in preventive medicine today. Today, I am sharing one part of one of those 7 laws. Toward the end of this teaching, I will share something my grandmother told me she only explained to women who were truly ready to understand it. Stay with me. My grandmother Rachel was born in Łódź, Poland in 1921. She came to Brooklyn as a young woman with almost nothing: a suitcase, a few photographs, and a collection of handwritten notebooks that she called her real medicine. She lived to be 98 years old. She took no medication until she was 90. She never had a cardiologist. She cooked every day of her life. She walked, she prayed, and she slept deeply. When I was a child, I thought her health was luck. When I was a medical student, I thought it was genetics. When I was 45 years old and my own body was collapsing, exhausted, hormonally disrupted, mentally fogged, unable to lose weight no matter what I ate or how carefully I exercised, I went back to her notebooks, and what I found there shook me as a scientist. Rachel had documented in her careful Yiddish handwriting a set of principles she called simply the rules of life. They were not mystical, they were precise, and one of them, she had underlined it 3 times, was this: the body must have its night. The stomach must be empty before you sleep. Food taken after dark is food the body cannot properly receive. It becomes a burden instead of nourishment. It robs the body of the one window it has to repair itself. I remember the Friday evenings in her kitchen in Brooklyn as a girl. The smell of the challah, the candles already lit. Dinner was always finished well before dark. Once the Shabbat candles were burning, the kitchen was closed. Not dramatically, not with rules posted on the wall. It was simply the rhythm of the house. The night had its own purpose, and food was not part of it. Before we go further, I want you to type something in the comments. Type, "My body deserves its night." Just those 4 words. Because what I am teaching today begins with that understanding that nighttime is not simply the absence of daytime. It is a biological event with its own set of processes. And when we interrupt it with food, we interrupt something that is absolutely central to whether we age well or age poorly. Now, let me tell you exactly what is happening inside the body of a woman over 50 who eats within 2 or 3 hours of going to sleep. And I want to be specific because you deserve precision and not generalities. You wake up at 3 in the morning and you cannot fall back asleep. You have been told this is menopause. You have been told it is stress. You have been told it is simply part of getting older. Your doctor ran your blood work and said everything looks fine, everything is within normal range. But you know something is wrong. Your energy is gone by 2 in the afternoon. You have gained weight in places you never carried it before, around the abdomen, around the organs. Your digestion is slow in the morning. Your joints feel stiff. You feel in a way that is hard to put into words that your body is fighting against itself rather than working with you. I hear this from women every single week, and when I ask them about their evenings, I find the same pattern almost every time. Dinner at 7 or 8, a little something at 9, a handful of crackers, some nuts, a square of chocolate, a glass of warm milk, a small bowl of cereal, maybe a light snack while watching television at 10, lights out at 11. This pattern, so common, so unremarkable, so innocent seeming, is one of the most metabolically destructive things a postmenopausal woman can do to her body. And the reason the conventional medical advice has failed you on this point is threefold. First, doctors treat late night eating as a calorie problem. They say, watch your portions, choose healthier snacks, reduce your overall intake, but this completely misses the biological mechanism. The problem is not the calories. It is the timing signal that food sends to every organ in your body at the moment it is consumed. Second, the research that forms the basis of standard nutritional advice was conducted primarily on men or on premenopausal women whose hormonal profile is entirely different from yours. The metabolic reality of the postmenopausal body has only recently begun to be studied seriously as its own distinct terrain, and the findings are changing everything. Third, no one is connecting this to sleep. Late night eating directly suppresses deep sleep, specifically the slow wave sleep stages during which the body releases growth hormone, consolidates memory, and performs its most critical cellular repair. When you eat close to bedtime, you are not just adding calories at the wrong time, you are suppressing one of the most powerful anti-aging biological processes your body is capable of. A 2020 study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that women who consumed a higher proportion of their daily calories in the evening hours had significantly elevated cardiovascular risk, and this was independent of their total caloric intake. It was not about how much they were eating. It was entirely about when. And a 2023 report from the American Heart Association confirmed that cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death in American women over 50, and that the majority of the contributing risk factors are modifiable. Meal timing is now recognized as one of those factors, but this information will take years to reach your doctor's office in a consistent, actionable form. My grandmother Rachel did not have the language of circadian biology, but she had the Talmud. In Tractate Gittin, The rabbis documented health practices for preserving the body, and among the cautions explicitly recorded was the counsel against eating heavily in the evening hours, because the body was understood, even in antiquity, to require not just mental rest at night, but physiological rest. The digestive organs needed their cessation, just as the worker needed his Shabbat. And Maimonides, Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, the 12th century physician and rabbi who wrote his Regimen of Health for the Sultan Saladin in 1198, was explicit on this point. He wrote that eating before sleep was among the primary and most consistent causes of illness in people who were otherwise healthy and temperate in their habits. He described the body at night as engaged in a process of settling and refining, and food consumed too close to sleep interrupted that process and produced what he called, in his language, coarse matter in the body. He was describing, in the vocabulary of medieval medicine, exactly what modern researchers now call metabolic inflammation, 800 years ago. Written down, passed on. What is one of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity? What I am teaching you today is part of the 4th law, the law of the sacred fast. Not the dramatic full-day fasts of Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av, though those too carry physiological wisdom that modern science is only beginning to understand and quantify. I am talking about the nightly fast that Jewish tradition built into the architecture of daily life. The window of 12 to 14 hours between the last meal of the evening and the first meal of the following morning. My grandmother called it the body's Shabbat. Every night, she said, the body needs its own Shabbat, its own cessation, its own sacred pause in which the work of repair can begin. In 2019, researchers at the Salk Institute in California published landmark findings on what they called time-restricted eating. What they found was not new. It confirmed what physicians in circadian medicine had been building toward for 2 decades. The human body operates on a precisely calibrated 24-hour internal clock, and that clock governs not just sleep but insulin production, cortisol rhythms, immune function, liver detoxification, and cellular repair at every level. The liver, the pancreas, the gut, the heart, every organ has its own internal clock, and all of those clocks are synchronized by 2 primary inputs: light and the timing of food. When you eat close to sleep, you do not simply give your body additional calories to process. You send every organ a biological signal that says, stay awake, keep working, do not begin repair. Insulin rises. The liver, which should be transitioning into repair mode between midnight and 3 in the morning, is instead managing blood glucose, the metabolic window that the body depends on to regulate overnight blood sugar, to initiate cellular detoxification, to consolidate memory through proper sleep architecture. That window is interrupted, and for the postmenopausal woman whose estrogen levels have already compromised her baseline insulin sensitivity, this is not a minor disruption. It is a chronic, low-grade assault on every system in the body. Here is what I want you to do. Not as a diet, not as a protocol with rules and percentages, as a practice, a Jewish practice with 3,000 years of validation behind it, and with the full weight of modern metabolic science now confirming every word my grandmother wrote in her notebooks. Tonight, after your evening meal, close the kitchen. Do it gently and without drama. There is no punishment in this practice. There is only permission. Permission for your body to begin its night. Drink water, drink herbal tea. In our tradition, these herbs are not simply comforting. They are medicinal. Maimonides wrote specifically about the calming properties of chamomile. A 2017 clinical study at the University of Pennsylvania found that chamomile extract produced measurable improvements in sleep onset and duration in women over 60. lemon balm, peppermint, passion flower. These are herbs the women in my grandmother's community used as evening medicine, and the research is now giving them their proper recognition. Drink your tea. Let the kitchen be finished. Let your body begin. If you feel hungry in the first week after the kitchen closes, I want you to understand what that hunger is. For most women, what feels like physical hunger at 9 or 10 in the evening is not hunger at all. It is a conditioned response, a habit loop built over years or decades. Sometimes it is emotional. Sometimes it is dehydration mistaken for hunger. Sometimes it is a cortisol elevation triggered by the stimulation of a phone screen or a television that the body is interpreting as stress and responding to, with a craving for comfort. The body of a woman over 50 who has been eating close to bedtime for years has built a dependency on that evening input. Withdrawing it gently over 1 to 2 weeks recalibrates the system. The craving softens. The sleep deepens. The morning begins to feel different. I want to tell you what the morning looked like for me after I began this practice at 45. During the 90 days I spent applying my grandmother's 7 laws, one by one. Within the first week, I was sleeping through the night for the first time in 4 years. By the end of the first month, the morning bloating I had accepted as simply part of my body now had disappeared. By 90 days, my fasting insulin, which my own physician had flagged as borderline elevated, had returned to a healthy range. I had not changed what I was eating. I had only changed when the eating stopped. There is a second element of this law that my grandmother always taught alongside the nightly fast, a specific morning practice that she said was inseparable from it, and that determines whether the body's overnight repair work is properly completed and carried forward into the day. Without it, she said, the nightly fast produces only half of its benefit. I will share that in a coming teaching. For now, I want you to begin here. Begin with the evening. I want to be honest with you about something. For years as a physician, I told patients that their late night habits were probably fine in moderation. I believed that. I was trained to believe it. And at 45, when my own body showed me otherwise, I had to sit with the discomfort of having been wrong. Not because the medicine I was taught was dishonest, but because it was incomplete. The research on circadian metabolism was not in my textbooks. The physiological specificity of the postmenopausal body was barely addressed in my training. The wisdom of Maimonides was not considered medicine. It was considered history. We are living through a moment when that is beginning to change. The science is accelerating, but the gap between what the research is now confirming and what actually reaches a woman during a standard 15-minute appointment remains enormous. And that gap is where women are suffering. My grandmother used to hold up her hand and say, "Sarah, these laws do not work one at a time." She would look at her fingers and say, 7 fingers. Can you hold water with 3? The 7 laws are a system. Each one builds on the others. The nightly fast I have taught you today is one piece, a critical piece. It becomes more powerful when practiced alongside the second law and the 5th law, which I will share in the weeks ahead. For now, begin here. Begin tonight. In our tradition, the body is not a possession. It is not something you own and may neglect as you choose. It is described in the Torah as Tselem Elohim, created in the image of the divine, and the obligation of Shmirat Haguf, guarding the body, is not optional in the Jewish understanding of life. It is a sacred responsibility. To care for this body at every age is to honor the life you have been entrusted with. Ruth, the woman from our community in Brooklyn who died at 67, was not unlucky. She was uninformed, And that is not a judgment. It is a tragedy because the information existed. My grandmother had it. Maimonides had written it down in the 12th century. The body itself has been signaling it for far longer than that. We simply had not been given the tools to listen. You are listening now, and that changes things. Here is what I am asking you to do this week. Tonight, close the kitchen 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep. Drink chamomile tea. Let your body begin its night. Do this for 7 days. Come back here and tell me in the comments what shifted for you. If this teaching reached you, please subscribe and turn on your notifications. I release a new teaching every week, and each one adds another layer of the 7 laws. Share this with a woman you love, a friend, a sister, a daughter who is watching her mother struggle and does not know where to look for the answers. The information that could have reached Ruth 30 years ago can reach someone today. In my next teaching, I will share another of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, one that most women over 50 have been approaching in exactly the wrong direction without realizing it. It involves something many of us do first thing in the morning, and it determines whether everything else we do for our health that day will actually work. Until then, l'chaim, to life.